Meiman, all-knowing and all-powerful, starting with the elderly wolf uncle chapter 57. The words did not fall. Syllable. His hand was already on Clark's hand, and suddenly exerted force, and the latter's muscles also tensed and burst with strength. Outcome. Clark's hand was broken by Chen Tian without resistance, little by little. Rumble. As the two of them increased their strength, the land was already covered with wisps of cracks, the deeper the gap became, and the number of countless animals nearby sensed the danger. Burrowed out from all corners and fled around in panic. This. Clark looked at his hand held by Chen Tian, his eyes wide and the corners of his eyes jumped. At this moment, all the muscles on his arm have swollen, the lines are fierce, and the dense blood vessels are constantly beating under the skin. Clark prides himself on having used all his strength. But Rao was so, his hand was so broken by Chen Tian, even if he struggled, he couldn't press it again. However, Clark was horrified. Next second, Chen Tian's other hand suddenly clenched into a fist. Syllable. Between the 5 fingers, the air in the palm of the palm was compressed to the extreme and suddenly exploded, creating a terrifying explosion. Rumble. Immediately after that, Chen Tian punched out, and the speed was extremely fast. Even the surrounding air was pulled by this punch, and in an instant the direction of his punch suddenly flowed. Boom. With a muffled sound, the punch had already landed on Clark's abdomen, and the huge force suddenly passed into his body, frantically tearing his internal organs. Under the severe pain, Clark was directly blasted back several steps by this punch. And those air currents that were pulled by Chen Tian out, after he hit Clark, this just formed a violent wind to sweep up the dust. So, the wind followed the direction Clark receded and blew violently. Damn it, Clark covered his belly, against the dusty wind, his clothes hunting, barely standing. He felt the pain in his abdomen that he had experienced for a long time since he was a child, and the shock in his eyes could not be dissipated for a long time. Too weak, Clark. Chen Tian looked at his shocked look, shook his head slightly, and made sarcastic remarks. He was going to provoke Clark today and force him to strike. Damn it, old, I won't let you go anyway. Quote. A succession of shocks, coupled with mockery. Clark, the good man in the past, finally ignited anger in his heart, and gritted his teeth. He threw himself straight forward and punched back. Rumble. Clark's punch once again pulled the airflow, and the fierce wind that was still whistling at him was actually blowing backwards towards Chen Tian with his movements. Clark, are you feeling angry? Seeing this, the corners of Chen Tian's mouth slightly hooked a smile, and he also chose to punch and fight. Rumble. The two burst out at super speed at the same time, their bodies flashed, and their fists collided instantly, emitting a terrifying hum. Messy and powerful air turbulence. In an instant, from the place where the two fists collided, they swept out towards the surroundings, directly wrapping all the dust and debris around the two to form a circle, whistling outward. All the surrounding trees were violently swaying and their leaves flew due to the sweeping of this circle of airflow. Boom. Meanwhile, the dust on the surface was also lifted, and an endless dust mist filled the air, and it rolled up under the influence of the hissing wind, like a rolling dust and fog wave. The confrontation between two super powerful powers, the power that bursts out of their hands is far from what normal people can imagine. Their physical fitness has long surpassed that of ordinary people, I don't know how many times. This can't be. Clark felt the power coming in from his arm and muttered again. It's just that he can't tell whether his heart is anger or joy, or both. Because he saw someone exactly like himself. Not enough. Far from enough. Clark, you're still too weak now. Quote. Seeing this, Chen Tian still shook his head. Develop your potential. The words did not fall. He had already raised his fist and slammed into the opponent's abdomen. This punch is more powerful, faster, and even pulls out Dao Dao after images in the air. Boom. Clark, who had not yet had much combat experience, was caught off guard and was hit by a punch again. Chen Tian's fist shook with great force, pulling up a strong airflow to form a violent wind, blowing towards Clark. Clark suffered another blow to his abdomen, and even his breathing stopped. Before the severe pain could spread in the body, the whole person had already risen from the ground, bent over, and flew out upside down like a cannonball. Rumble. The trees behind it were all washed away, and Clark flew out by inertia for about 10 meters, slamming into a large tree surrounded by 3 people. Big trees sway, trunks burst and debris flying. Clark landed on the ground, and after rolling a few times, he barely lay on the ground. Abominable. Breath one by one, call one by one. He stood up with both hands on the ground, cursing and gasping, because his abdomen had been hit hard by Li Hao, continuously, and his eyes were already bloodshot and red. Densely covered with blood. Clark felt that when facing Chen Tian, there was a feeling of strength and nowhere to be used. He knew that although the other party was stronger, the gap between the two sides had not yet reached this point. There is only one reason why he has no backhand, that is, he is too much worse in combat experience. Chen, thinking about it, Clark looked up suddenly. Right now, he suddenly noticed a high-speed moving sound of breaking the sky in his ears, and when he raised his eyes, he saw that Chen Tian had already flashed in front of him. You're too weak. Chen Tian shook his head and seemed to be a little disappointed, and the words followed his feet and kicked Clark's chest fiercely. Superpower exploded in an instant. The majestic power was frantically poured into the latter's body along this kick. Even Clark's bones with the blessing of a steel body and an extraordinary density are slightly deformed. Rumble. It exploded. Clark was kicked again by this kick. Between the sharp pain in his chest, he only felt that the scenery around him was turning into an afterimage and quickly retreating. Boom, boom, boom. The whole person was ejected like a missile, and Clark couldn't even count it, crashing countless trees everywhere he went, sweeping out endless winds and hissing. The dust and fog that covered the sky was soon shrouded in front of him, and I felt that my back was bombarded by gravity. Countless tree fragments fell, and he also hit the ground due to inertia, setting off dust and debris splashing to stop time. A long and narrow ditch appears among the trees. There is a place where I missed it. I forgot to write about the ability to